The Envy. Chapter 1. The Shaded Garden.
The water of the marble fountain in the estate of Cyrene fell with a rhythmic, crystal melody, splash, 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 cooling the warm afternoon air. The walkways were lined with manicured pomegranate trees, and the vines were heavy with white grapes that shined like pearls under the Mediterranean sun. Cassian stood on his shaded terrace, an iron stylus in his hand, his eyes fixed not on his own beautiful gardens, but on the massive hill across the valley. There, rising above the olive groves, were the colossal white columns of Lord Julian's new villa. Julian had just imported 50 blocks of blue, veined Numidian marble, and his ships had brought a dozen exotic peacocks to roam his lawns. The whole province was talking about Julian's wealth, his status, and the grand banquets he hosted for the governor. Cassian was tobacco, brown and 30 winters old, a successful landowner in his own right. His fields were fertile, his olive oil was prized in the local markets, and his family lived in absolute comfort. Yet, as he stared at the distant columns, his face was twisted into a grim mask of silent, bitter resentment. The beauty of his own pomegranate trees felt like ash in his mouth. He does not deserve it, Cassian muttered to the empty terrace, his knuckles turning white as he squeezed his stylus. Julian is a shallow fool who inherited his father's gold. He knows nothing of the soil, nothing of the hard work. Yet, the governor visits his estate, and the poets write verses about his gardens. My oil is finer, my ledgers are cleaner. Why does fortune crown a parasite while I am left in the shadow? It makes my own success look like a joke. He was consuming his own heart from the inside out. He wasn't living in his own beautiful garden. He was living as a ghost inside Julian's villa, measuring his own worth by the height of another man's pillars. He was letting the virus of envy poison his sight, turning his own abundance into a source of deep, suffocating misery. From the shade of an old olive tree at the edge of the terrace sat Theron, a retired estate manager who had spent 40 years overseeing the public lands of the province. He wore a simple, uncolored wool cloak, his posture completely relaxed, his hands steady as he polished a pair of iron pruning shears. He had been quietly observing Cassian's bitter vigilance for days. "You are throwing mud into your own well, Cassian," Theron said, his voice deep, slow, and unshakable. "Julian's ships are sailing in the sea, but you are the one who is drowning on dry land. You call it a desire for justice, but I see a man who is actively setting fire to his own harvest because he hates the size of his neighbor's barn." Cassian spun around, his stylus pointing aggressively at the old manager. "A fire. This is about recognition, Theron. I have worked honestly for every cestus I own. Julian simply walks into luxury. To see incompetence celebrated while dedication is ignored, how can a man look at that and not feel the sting?" Theron set his pruning shears down on the stone wall with a cold, sharp thud. "The sting is not from Julian's marble, Cassian. It is from your own arrogance," the old manager murmured, his eyes steady under his gray brows. "You believe that, because you are industrious, the universe owes you the highest pedestal in the valley. You have turned your life into a competitive race with a man who doesn't even know your pulse rate. You are begging for a prison cell, and you are using Julian's success as the key."
Chapter 2. The Theft of Light.
Cassian walked to the marble railing, his breath coming in short. "My fields are smaller, Theron. My house has only 10 pillars, his has 50. When the citizens walk past my gates, they do not stop to admire. They keep walking until they reach his villa. I am invisible in my own valley. And who told you that greatness is measured by the number of eyes that look at your gate? Theron asked, rising slowly from his seat. He walked over to a vibrant pomegranate tree growing near the terrace steps. He plucked a single ripe, red fruit and held it out to the young landowner. "Look at this fruit, Cassian," Theron commanded softly. "It is full, it is sweet, and its seeds are like rubies." Does this tree refuse to ripen its fruit because the cedar tree on the mountain is taller? Does the pomegranate weep and wither because the emperor's gardens have gold leaf statues? Cassian frowned, his anger momentarily tripped by the old man's cadence. "It is a tree, Theron. It does not have a mind." "Exactly." Theron nodded, his voice dropping into that deep, heavy, clinical clarity of the inner citadel. "It does not have a mind corrupted by opinion. It follows its own nature. It takes the water, it takes the sun, and it produces the finest fruit it can within its own borders. It is complete in itself. But you have abandoned your own nature. Every time you look across the valley and curse Julian's wealth, you are stealing the light from your own fields. You are refusing to enjoy your own wealth, your own family, and your own peace simply because someone else has more. He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. You are a rich man who has chosen to live like a starving beggar." Theron stepped closer, his presence unyielding like the stone pillars around them. The Stoic sages taught us that envy and jealousy is the ultimate surrender of sovereignty. When you envy another man, you are declaring that he is the master of your happiness. You are giving him the power to ruin your day without him even lifting a finger. You are letting his abundance become your poverty?
Chapter 3: The Anatomy of the Boundary.
Theron picked up a piece of white chalk from his pouch and drew 2 unequal squares on the smooth stone floor of the terrace, one small, one large. The envious man believes that life is a single, grand banquet hall where the food is limited, Theron said, tapping the large square. He looks at Julian's large square and says, "Because his square is large, my square must be small. He has stolen my space. This is a mathematical illusion. The universe is infinite, and virtue is not a finite resource. Julian's blue marble does not make your olive oil less pure. His peacocks do not make your pomegranates less sweet. His reality is an external thing, an indifferent shadow that has no access to your soul." He then rubbed his foot over the border lines, erasing the distinction completely. "Look at the scale of your own mind, Cassian," the old manager whispered, his voice carrying the weight of a mountain. "The only space you have the power to govern is the internal citadel, your thoughts, your choices, your gratitude today. When you spend your night plotting how to diminish Julian's reputation or praying for his ships to sink, you are bringing filth into your own temple. You are letting the shadow of another man's external luxury destroy the internal gold of your own character. A wise man looks across the valley and says, 'Good for Julian, let him enjoy his marble. My duty is to cultivate my own garden with absolute virtue today.' He drops the competition, clears the fog, and remains unshakable inside his own borders." Theron leaned over the railing, his face a mask of absolute structure. Every time the sting of envy strikes your chest, apply the clinical knife of reason. Ask your soul, does Julian's wealth prevent me from being just? Does it prevent me from being brave? Does it prevent me from finding serenity in this hour? If the answer is no, then his wealth is nothing to you. It is a ghost. Leave the ghost on his hill and take up your tools.
Chapter 4. The Fall of the White Columns.
4 weeks later, the illusion of Julian's invincibility collapsed in a single autumn night. A sudden, catastrophic earthquake, the wrath of the earth, shook the entire valley of Cyrene. The ground groaned with a terrifying, subterranean roar, and the stone walls of the villas began to sway like wheat in the wind. Cassian's house, built with low, thick, and modest stone foundations, creaked and lost a few tiles from the roof, but it stood firm, its structure designed for utility rather than vanity. But across the valley on the high hill, the disaster was absolute. Julian's grand villa, built with massive, top-heavy Numidian marble columns on a rushed foundation, could not handle the vibration. With a deafening, metallic crash that echoed across the entire valley, the 50 white pillars snapped like dry twigs, bringing the entire grand roof down in a massive cloud of grey dust and rubble. The exotic peacocks fled into the dark forests, screaming in terror. By morning, the valley was silent. Cassian walked to the edge of his terrace, looking across the ravine through the pale dawn mist. The grand palace on the hill was gone. There was nothing left but a chaotic mountain of broken marble and shattered timber. For a split second, the old animal instinct, the venomous joy of envy, the satisfaction of seeing a rival brought down to the dirt, tried to storm Cassian's mind. A dark voice whispered inside his head, "Look at him now. The columns are broken. The universe has balanced the ledger. You are the master of the valley tonight." His heart began to hammer against his ribs, but Cassian looked down at the white chalk marks on his terrace floor. He remembered Theron's clinical words, "Julian's reality is nothing to your soul. Do not let his destruction corrupt your virtue today." He closed his eyes and took a deep, steady breath of the fresh morning air, forcing his mind to step back from the edge of that dark pleasure. He dropped the narrative of competition and focused entirely on the fact a human being is buried in the ruins. "I have strong hands and iron tools. My duty is humanity." The red fog of spite evaporated, leaving an absolute, unshakable clarity. "Get the heavy oxen ropes from the barn, Caelan," Cassian ordered his farmhands, his voice cutting through the morning quiet with an iron authority. "And call the strong workers. We are going up to the hill."
Chapter 5. The Authentic Harvest.
The rescue work on the hill was a brutal, sweaty descent into the reality of human, fragile frame. For 6 hours, Cassian and his men worked alongside Julian's surviving servants, using iron levers and heavy hemp ropes to move the massive blocks of blue Numidian marble that had once caused so much envy. Cassian didn't look at the stone with bitterness or joy. He treated it as a simple problem of weight and leverage. By noon, they cleared a path to the lower cellars, dragging Lord Julian out from beneath a collapsed wooden beam. He was alive, but his expensive silk robes were torn and covered in grey mortar dust, his face pale with shock, his hands bleeding. He had no columns left, no status, and no banquets to offer. He was just a shivering, terrified man sitting in the dirt. Julian looked up through his tears, recognizing Cassian. He shrank back slightly, expecting his neighbor to laugh at his humiliation, to deliver the final insult of a long-standing rivalry. "The villa is gone, Cassian," Julian whispered, his voice shaking. "Everything is in the dust. I have nothing left to show the governor." Cassian did not smile, nor did he look down at him with superiority. He wrapped his own dry wool cloak around the wealthy man's shivering shoulders and handed him a wooden cup of fresh water from his own flasks. "The marble was just stone, Julian. It belonged to the mountain before it belonged to your villa, and it has returned to the mountain today. Your life is still in your chest, and your character is something no earthquake can bury. Come down to my terrace. We have bread, we have shelter, and the pomegranates are ripe for the harvest." Julian stared at him in absolute silence, a profound shame and gratitude melting the painted arrogance from his face. He took the cup with trembling hands, realizing that the man he had ignored in his days of glory was the only wall that stood between him and the void today. They walked back down the hill together as the sun cleared the horizon, illuminating the entire valley in a brilliant, golden light. Cassian walked through his own gates, looking at his modest 10 pillars and his green vines. He didn't feel small anymore. He didn't feel invisible. The comparison had been melted by the reality of the crisis. He found that his wealth wasn't in the height of his house, but in the unbreakable structure of his own soul. Theron was standing near the fountain, stoking a small fire in the brazier. He looked at Cassian's dirty hands and his steady, peaceful posture, a deep glint of pride in his old eyes. "The columns are down, Cassian." "Yes," Cassian replied, taking a slow sip of the fresh water. "And the strange thing is, Theron, when I looked at that broken marble today, I realized that Julian's luxury was never my enemy. I spent months thinking his wealth was stealing my light, but the only thief in this valley was the envy inside my own chest. He was just an actor wearing a purple robe, and I was a fool who forgot to cultivate his own soil. Today, the hill is empty, but my garden is completely full, because you finally looked into your own ledger," Theron said, his voice deep and full of an unshakable pride. "When you stop comparing your journey to the shadows of others and start finding your completion within your own virtue, you become invincible. Let the world build its palaces and let the earth shake them down. Your mind remains a sovereign citadel that no fortune can conquer." Look straight at the ruling center of your neighbor and look straight at your own. Do not let your peace be disturbed by what is external to your mind. Cassian took a deep, clean breath of the autumn air, turned toward his fields, and walked firmly into the harvest with empty hands and an unbreakable, unshakable soul. Most of us spend our entire lives trapped in the poisonous prison of comparison and envy. We scroll through digital screens looking at the curated palaces, the status symbols, and the artificial successes of others, letting their abundance turn our own lives into a source of bitter misery. We have made ourselves psychological dependents, allowing the height of our neighbor's pillars to dictate the value of our own soul. But a Stoic knows that comparison is the death of gratitude. The next time you find the sting of envy knocking violently on the gates of your mind, stop. Do not look across the valley. Remember the pomegranate tree of Cyrene. Take a deep breath, look at the tool in your hands, and say to your soul, His square is not my reality. Clear the external noise, find your own borders, and spend your limited energy only on the cultivation of your own character. Let others have their marble. You keep your iron discipline. This is Neo-Aurelium. Transmission on the ultimate victory over envy. Stay unshakable. Take care of yourself